So, great. So I'm just going to share. Great. Now I'm not going to keep an eye on the chat because I find that a bit distracting while I'm talking. So if something important comes up, feel free to interrupt me, McGee. Otherwise, I'm happy to take
Otherwise, I'll keep an eye
questions and comments at the end. So welcome everyone. So this, as McGee said, this is a talk that I gave at the Sydney Content Strategy Meetup last October. For those of you who know Elle Garrity, who spoke at this meetup last month, she's the organizer of that meetup, and she invited us to come and do a talk. And this is the one I gave. It was at the time it was basically an idea that I'd just been sort of tossing around in my head and just wanted to get some ideas out there about. And I'd say it's still in that state because since October last year, we've been very busy on a project and I really haven't had the space to develop the ideas any further. When I presented it in Sydney, it certainly seemed to resonate with people. And I think I'm not quite ready to call it a new framework or anything kind of official like that yet. But I think as a term and as a set of attributes that are desirable in content, it does seem to be picking up on something that I think we don't talk about enough in content design, and also something that I think we sometimes design content with the best intentions, and we unwittingly introduce things into our content that actually make it more difficult for users to sort of pick up and use. The idea of encapsulated content is sort of meant to be a bit of a corrective to some of the things that we do in a well-intentioned way, and really another sort of dimension to the way we think about content design. So, without further ado, what started to get me thinking about something that I thought was missing in the way we think about content and the way that content meets user needs is actually some comments that were coming up doing content testing and usability testing with people. So, we've been doing this at WE for quite a number of years, and we'll often get comments like, when somebody's looking at a piece of content, I don't really know what I'm looking at. So it's not necessarily I don't know what this is about, but I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what this piece of content I'm looking at is supposed to do for me. I don't know what its purpose is. Comments when someone sees a link, am I supposed to click on this? I'm not sure. So that whole decision-making process about whether a link or a button is people understand what it is, but there's a decision-making process that happens about whether clicking on it is something that is kind of optional or something that they're supposed to do as part of this sort of process that we're putting them on. And then probably most of all, the hoary old PDF issue, and I've kind of been on this bandwagon for years. People will often say they like downloading a PDF. We hear this again and again. And in content design and content strategy, we're always going on about how everybody should be converting their PDFs into digital formats. And that's something I still believe, at least for most PDFs. But there's something about the PDF, something about that sense that somebody has something packaged, nicely sort of packaged up, that they've kind of got the thing, that actually gives users a sense of confidence that they're not getting from our digital content. And sometimes when organisations make that effort to convert their PDFs into digital content, they lose some of that sense of the content being contained and having clear boundaries that they get from downloading a PDF. It was those kinds of comments that got me thinking, well, we really need a word to describe what all these people are looking for, what it is that they feel is kind of missing in our content at the moment. And that's what I call encapsulated content. I apologise for introducing a 5-syllable word into the vocabulary. I have thought about whether there's a simpler word we can use, and I actually asked at the Sydney meetup if anyone can think of another word for it. Let me know. People did throw around a few ideas, but I think we ended up pretty much coming to the conclusion that encapsulation was the word that encapsulates the things that I'm trying to describe the best. So I'm going with encapsulated content. So what do I mean by encapsulated content? Well, here are some of the things that we often talk about in content design as desirable attributes of content. So we often say our content should be as concise as possible. We should get rid of words we don't need or things we don't need. Of course, it should be clearly written. We should be using plain language. We should be writing for an understanding that users have varying levels of literacy. It should be well structured, so it should be structured around a sort of a hierarchy of user needs, and it should be written with a clear sense of the needs that we're writing for, and they should be real needs. They shouldn't be user needs that we've just made up. They should be based on some kind of evidence. So that's kind of content design in a nutshell. That's what we're trying to do with content as content designers. And when I'm talking about encapsulated content, I do mean all of these things, but there's a few more attributes that I don't think are really captured in that sort of classic definition of what good content means from a content design point of view. So encapsulated content, like by encapsulated content, I mean content that has clear boundaries. You know where one piece of content ends and another piece begins. It's content that has clear size. So it's easy for a user to get a sense of the size of a piece of content at a glance. Content that doesn't have doesn't unexpectedly surprise users by actually being more than they thought it was. Content that makes clear what it is and what it is for, not just what it's about. And that's a distinction that I've been making more and more in project work. And I'll say more about what that means as we go on. Content that's easy to share, by which I mean it's content that's kind of packaged up in a way that somebody can share a URL and be confident that the person who clicks on that URL is going to get to the same piece of content that they've been reading. And just to sum everything up, it's content that feels like enough. It feels like it's enough. It feels to the user like it's enough to meet their need, the need that they have at the time that they're consuming it. And that's more a feeling than anything you can explicitly define. But it's again, and Dan Craddock, who's here today, often talks about confidence as the really key thing that we're trying to. The key kind of emotion that we're trying to create in users, and this is part of that. It's the confidence that I've got what I need. I'm not missing a whole lot of other stuff that I should be reading. I've kind of got enough content here to meet my need. So it's almost like giving them that sense of affirmation. Not so much that you are enough, but you have read enough. You can go on with your day. You can leave our website if you want to. I know we want people to stick around on our websites forever, but most users don't want to do that. Most users want to get what they need and get on with their lives. So our content should be not just meeting that need, but actually giving users confidence that they've met the need, that there's not this whole sort of hinterland of more content that they need to read. So I think in developing my thoughts about this, there's several kind of insights from psychology, and probably ones that people are already familiar with, that really have played into this idea. And I'm going to share at the end of the talk. I'm going to share a page with some links to articles you can read to find out more about these things. Really, one of the insights, and I'm sure people already have come across this idea before, is that giving people more choices creates a higher cognitive load. And there's a Nielsen Norman article I'll share that sort of explains this. But yeah, it's just the idea that the more choices we give to people, the higher the cognitive load. The thing I want to emphasize about that is that a link is an example of a choice that we're giving the user. Every time we link to anything, we are forcing the user to make a choice. It's this kind of set of like micro choices. Am I going to click on this link or am I not? So that's where sort of choice and cognitive load comes into it. Um, a lot of you will be familiar with David Dylan Thomas and his work on applying kind of theories around cognitive bias to content. And one of the main things he talks about is this idea that if somebody looks at a piece of content and it looks complex to them, people will assume that it is complex. So that's really playing into this idea of encapsulated content in the sense that people will make judgments about content based on their initial impression of it. So we have to not just give them the content they need, but we have to almost communicate to them something about the content as we're giving it to them. And then finally, the idea that people think in objects. And so those of you who were here a couple of months ago for Sophia Prater's talk on object-oriented UX, I can see some people here who are already sort of OUX heads. You'll still understand my talk if you didn't go to that talk, but those of you who are familiar with OUX will probably start to see some of the ways in which this thinking about encapsulated content really chimes in with an OUX way of thinking about things. The idea of things being easy for users to identify what it is that they're looking at. And what I think this can help us to do is to sort of bridge the gap between that OUX idea of objects and the kinds of content that we often write that don't necessarily clearly, where it's not necessarily obvious what the objects are or what they should be, where so for example, if we're talking about something like an event is a real world kind of thing, and an event page will sort of have a clear relationship to that real world thing. So in that sense, it's kind of clear how we would apply object-oriented UX in creating content around events. But when it comes to things, especially when we're working in government or in highly regulatory kind of environments, where we're often talking about things like rules, obligations, legislation, various things that people are trying to do and fit together that don't necessarily have that sense of concreteness to them. I think thinking about encapsulation is a way of kind of introducing some of that concreteness. Kind of, if we don't have those kind of pre-existing objects that we can just kind of grab onto and represent, how can we create objects of our own that actually give users a kind of a clear mental model about what's going on? So So I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of giants in the sense of basing my thinking on some of these kind of psychological insights. So I've said encapsulated content is a way of thinking through some of the issues that we see in content at the moment. And so I guess the other side of that is that a lot of the content that we create at the moment isn't well encapsulated, and I'm going to call that leaky content. It's content that is kind of spilling out all over the place, content that doesn't have that sense of unity and sort of clearly defined boundaries. So what do I mean by leaky content? So I've sort of identified what I think are a few attributes that you see in this kind of leaky content. Probably the most important is this one. It's unmindful linking. So if I can give a little bit of an aside about links, I'm a big fan of links. Links to me are the best thing about the internet. They kind of they're what makes the internet hypertext rather than just text. And they're the single most important kind of innovation probably of the web. I still remember, those of you who are old enough to remember the early days of the web, you might remember that sense of kind of giddy sort of glee that you had when you first realized that you could just link to anything on the web. You didn't have to ask anyone's permission. You didn't have to get anyone else to do it. It was kind of simple, and and you were it just gave us enormous power. But I think with power comes responsibility, and one of the things I don't think we think enough about as content designers is our linking practices. And this really comes back to that fact that every time we create a link in a piece of content, we are creating cognitive load for the user. We are forcing them to make a decision about whether they're going to click the link or not. Now, a lot of the time, there's a very good reason to do that. So, we're never going to have zero cognitive load, and there's a lot of the time links obviously are really useful, and we don't want to create an internet without links, but we do want to be thoughtful about whether the utility of a link to the user is enough to overcome that extra cognitive load. And we also want to make it easier for users to tell the difference between links that are essential and links that are not essential, or links that are kind of optional. So I think what we see in a lot of content, a lot of really well-intentioned content, is people will just link to everything they can link to. And users, we see in usability testing, when users encounter that kind of content, those links really slow them down, because every single time they get to a link, they're thinking, "Oh, I'm not sure if I need to click on this or not." So unmindful linking is a really big one. I think leaky content also often hides its size, so it will be difficult for a user to see when they first get to a piece of content how much there's going to be. And that might be within a single page, or it might be because we are, the actually meeting the user need is going to involve consuming content across several pages, and we're not really giving users clear expectations about that. This is also often content that has an unclear or a sort of a mixed purpose. And part of this is just that we're not doing proper content design, so we're not really defining our user needs well enough, and we're trying to meet a whole bunch of different user needs with the same piece of content. But often it's that we're just kind of creating a page about a topic without being really clear about what the user is supposed to get out of that page. So is this a page that is just explaining a concept to me? Is it a page that's giving me an overview of a whole sort of process? Is it a page that's drilling down in a granular way into a very specific task and giving me a set of steps for how to carry out that task? Is it a page that is about a government initiative? So is it something that the government or the organisation wants me to know about, rather than necessarily something I'm looking for myself? So what's this content actually? What is it, and what's it meant to do for me? It can often be really hard for users to work that out from a glance at a piece of content. Too many places to go for the same task. So this is sort of related to the hides its size thing. So we think we're going to meet our task on one page, but we end up having to go to 5 different pages because there's all this kind of background contextual work we need to do before we can even start doing the thing we want to do. And telling people they need to read more, and this is something we communicate often in quite subtle ways, this idea that we're constantly telling people there's more stuff to read. And again, this is trying to be helpful. It's like, oh, we want to let users know that there's all this extra stuff on our website. But the way we communicate that often gives users the impression that they haven't got to the end. When they finish this page, oh, there's 5 other pages. So am I supposed to go and read these other 5 pages? Are they, is there really important information on those pages that I haven't got on this page for some reason? Or are they just pages I can read if I happen to want to sort of delve deeper or get some related information? We're often not really good at communicating the difference between those things. So I'm going to give you some examples of leaky content. I'm going to start with one from the Apple website. I like to use Apple for bad examples because people often, I'm an Apple fan myself. I'm talking to you from a MacBook, but especially in its help content, a lot of this is actually pretty badly designed. And this is a page on Apple's sort of help website about what to do before you sell, give away, trade in, or recycle your Mac. I actually had to do this recently. I was giving away an old Mac, so this is from personal experience. So it sort of starts off well. So I think that's it's a clear title, a nice little summary to start with. Reset your Mac to factory settings to prepare it for a new owner. The before you begin section is sort of fine. But then you can see there's these kind of two main sections on the page. There's one that's called use, erase all content and settings. And there's another one that's called if you can't use, erase all content and settings. So I will read out to you what it says under use, erase all content and settings. Erase all content and settings is a feature that makes it easier to reset your Mac to factory settings. Your Mac has this feature only if it's using linked Mac OS Monterey or later, and is again, another link, Mac with Apple Silicon, or another link, or a Mac with the Apple T2 security chip. If your Mac has this feature, you don't need to follow the other steps in this article. Instead, find out how to use erase all content and settings. So in other words, it's asking you to basically go to 3 pages to work out whether your Mac has a particular feature or not. And then if the answer is yes, which is supposed to be kind of the default, really, because all modern Macs do have this feature. If the answer is yes, the rest of this page actually doesn't apply to you. You go off, the actual process you need is off on a whole other page. So this is an example of just having to go to too many places to actually do what you're trying to do. This is an example, and I'm not expecting you to read this page, but I just want to show you, give you a sense of the size of it. This is from the Australian government website about private health insurance. And I just want to read you this opening paragraph. Your starting point for information about private health insurance, what it is, what benefits it offers, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of things about that. First of all, the phrase your starting point. So we're basically implying to the user that this really long page is just the starting point. In other words, this is just a starting point. There's a whole lot of other stuff you need to do. So what's the actual need we're trying to solve for the user? Is it because if we're just trying to give users a very basic understanding of how private health insurance works, surely they shouldn't need to read even this much content, let alone this just be the starting point for their journey. So to me, that's an example of kind of unmindful language around giving that user that sense of confidence that they've got enough. We're giving the user way more than enough. And then if you have a look at the navigation that it sort of appears on the right hand side of the page, you can also see an example of a whole lot of different types of content, a whole lot of different things that content is trying to do, all kind of shoved into one section. So we've got this page, which seems like it's meant to be just a general introduction to the topic, kind of mixed in with information about private health insurance reforms. So this is like information about a government change that happened, operating rules, which surely isn't for regular users. That must be for only relevant to someone else. And then the prostheses list, which is who knows what that is, but it doesn't. These just seem like a whole lot of really disparate sort of user needs, without a clear sense of what user we have in mind for this, and what we're actually trying to do for them. So it's this sense that we're just creating pages about topics without really having a sense of what the purpose of each of them is, and without giving the user an easy way to work that out for themselves. I'm also going to give you an example. This is from some content that we worked on at Weave, so we're not immune to this at all. This is from a couple of years ago, where in collaboration with the ACCC, we did some work around their content for consumers and businesses. I don't know if there's anyone from the ACCC here with us. I think we did a lot of really good work on making things like consumer guarantees clearer. But I just want to mention one thing that we did that I think we could have done better. So the organisation publishes a bunch of basically PDF publications that are kind of more full-length guides to the kinds of things that we were talking about on the web pages. And if you look at the wording that we've got in our section that's linking to those guides, We just say, read our guide for consumers and for business and legal practitioners. Okay, so it's just an imperative, read our guides. We're not telling people why they might want to read the guides. We're not telling people what the guides are going to offer that our web page doesn't. We're just telling them to go away and read something else. And then similarly, right down the bottom of the page, we have this see also heading. See also is one of the main culprits of leaky content in my book. See also, and then a bunch of links. Again, as a user, do I have to? Do I have, is this telling me I have to go to these links? How do I work out which might be relevant to me and which aren't? So there's just this sense of there's always something else to read. We never actually get to the end. And we know what users want to do is get to the end. And then another example from personal experience, applying for a partner visa. When I talked about making it difficult to estimate the size of a page, this is one of the main offenders. This particular pattern of accordions. So we have a lot of conversations about accordions as content designers. I'm sure you have in your organizations too. People like them because they do seem to make your content look tidier. But in this, and I'm not saying there's never a place for them, but in this case, the organization, so this is immigration, they've used accordions to try to illustrate a process. And when you look at this page, it kind of looks, oh, okay, that's pretty simple. Okay, applying for a partner visa, that's going to be easy because there's just 5 steps to it. But then when you start to click through the accordions, you just end up with this almost never-ending kind of nesting. So you've actually got accordions within accordions within accordions in this website. So there's this sense that the content is always expanding. You never actually get to the point where you're ready to get started because there's always more that you need to read. And I really sympathise with the people working on this content because it is a super complicated process, and it would be good if we could present it to users in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. But my experience as a user in this case was that I almost felt sort of misled about how complex the process was. Everything just seemed to be sort of buried away and swept under the carpet until I actually started sort of clicking through these accordions. So they're all examples of leaky content. So just to reiterate, the attributes that I'm seeing in leaky content are things like unmindful linking, content that hides its size, content where the purpose is sort of unclear or where there's a lot of different purposes mixed together, giving people too many places to go for the same task, and then always telling people or giving people the impression that they need to read more. So what do we do instead? So what do we want to do? What does content look like when it is not leaky, when it's well encapsulated? So I've tried to identify a few attributes that I think are characteristic of encapsulated content. One of those is that we have clear, considered links. So I don't think there's some magical formula for how many links you should have on a page or how you should format your links or anything like that. That will be very dependent on context. But what I do want to say is we should spend as much time thinking about our links and whether we need a link or not in any given situation, as we do with every other kind of aspect of our content. Content should be sizable at a glance. So, or encapsulate content should be sizable at a glance. It should be easy for a user to work out how much they're going to have to read. And that doesn't necessarily mean we can always give them, a super concise amount of content to read. If something is inherently complex, sometimes we need to give them more content, but we shouldn't be hiding that away from the user. We should be, and there's various ways of doing it, but we should be making it easy for them to kind of work out what they're in for, to sort of meet their need. We should have an explicit and consistent type and purpose for every piece of content that we write. So let's try to get away as much as possible from things on our website that are just called web pages. Let's make every piece of content we write have a named purpose. And I'll give you some examples in a little while about those kinds of ways that we can sort of label our content. And this again is a very OUX inspired move, but it's the idea that we're creating a set of objects for users that becomes part of their mental model. So a user will know, I'm looking at an explainer page, I'm looking at a how-to page. It's really clear what I'm looking at, and it's clear to me what the difference between those two things is and what the different kinds of value that those two things offer me is. And a sense of being enough. A sense that, so again, there's no formula for this, but it's that sense that one of the things we should be testing with users is, have they got everything they need from this content? Do they feel confident that not just that they understand the content, not just that they understand every single individual paragraph of their content, but that if they think about their need as a whole, have they got enough to meet that need? Do they feel like they can now go away and get on with their lives? And then the final thing is, when we have related content, and again, I'm not saying related content is a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. But the way we frame the related content should not be imperative. And by imperative, I mean in the sense of the imperative mood in grammar. So that's when you're telling people things. So we often use the imperative mood for things like calls to action. So we'll say things like sign up, log in, buy now, those kinds of things. They're good uses of the imperative mood. But what I want to suggest is that when we're introducing related content, we want to get away from imperative phrases like see also, read more, where it seems like we're giving users instructions that they have to do this, they have to go and read more stuff. They're not finished yet. And that just means being a bit more verbose and being a bit more thoughtful about the way we sort of frame those related content areas in our content. So I've done a bit of this is like a platonic wireframe of what I would look for as the elements in a piece of well encapsulated content. So I would look for things like, I really love a label for a piece of content, telling you what type of content it is, a really clear and unambiguous label, as something that goes along with the title. The title tells you what the content's about, the label tells you what the content actually is. And we're good at doing this with some types of content. So often if we have events on our website, we'll have a label that says event. If we have blog posts, we'll have a label that says blog post or article or something like that. But then we get into this more kind of amorphous, kind of general content, and we lose that sense of specificity. We create a whole lot of stuff that's just web pages. The front loaded title obviously goes with the label. So front loading, for anyone who's not a content designer, it's about putting the important stuff at the front of the title. So it makes it easier for users to sort of scan through a list of things and see whether something, pick the thing that's going to be most relevant to them. The summary at the start, and like to think of this as the too long didn't read summary. So this is like, if you only have time to read 3 dot points, we're going to give you 3 dot points that basically are the most essential information from this page. And this is something we've used on a few projects. Even just yesterday, we got some feedback from some usability testing from users who just absolutely loved these summaries and really felt like they gave them that kind of confidence that they were in the right place. And then, a lot of classic content design stuff, meaningful subheadings. So the idea that you should be able to, again, scan the subheadings and get a sense of what's on the page. It's the idea of that you can kind of size up the page from sort of scanning the headings. A kind of Goldilocks amount of content. And again, this is going to differ depending on the content. So I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong amount of content in a piece of encapsulated content. It's what needs to be there to meet the need. Minimal and judicious inline linking. So I think inline linking, in other words, linking that was within sentences and paragraphs, is especially a common culprit for this kind of tripping people up and forcing them to hesitate. The Australian Government Style Manual actually recommends putting links at the end of sentences, and I think that's a good kind of first step to making your linking more mindful. But another thing is just thinking about, do I need this link in the first place? Am I just giving a user a link to something because it's there, or can I imagine a situation where this might actually benefit the user? And then we've got our non-imperative related content heading. So we'll see some examples, but some that I really like are ones like, you may also like, if you want to read more rather than just read more. This may be of interest. Other content on similar topics. Anything that kind of communicates to users that this is optional. This is just if they want to keep reading or they want to delve deeper, rather than you actually just need to read this other stuff because you haven't finished yet. And then related content that is actually related. So being mindful about our related content, not just shoving a whole load of links at people. So that's what I think a piece of related content might look like. I just want to finish by and open it up for chat. I just want to finish by suggesting this is actually one area where we can look for inspiration in other types of content on the web that is already kind of intrinsically encapsulated. And a lot of that is in sort of media organizations. So if you think about something like a movie on Netflix or a song on Spotify, that is kind of an intrinsically encapsulated piece of content. It's a content that has sort of very clear boundaries. And the way that these organizations present their content is often one that we can kind of take a bit of inspiration from. So for instance, and I often use Spotify when I'm introducing object-oriented UX to people as an example of really clearly labeled objects. So when you're looking at Spotify, you can always see what something is when you're looking at it. Is this an album, whether it's a song or an album or an artist or a playlist? So that's this idea of really clear, unambiguous labels. Another example of labeling that I really like is from journalism, where you'll often see articles labeled as things like explainer or quick update or long read, those kinds of things, really setting you up with a clear expectation of what you're going to get. I really love the term explainer. I think it's a really genius term that the journalism world came up with, and it's one that I quite often will try to introduce to projects. We do have, a lot of our content is very action oriented, but we do also have these times when we have to basically have to educate the user or just sort of educate them around a new mental model or a way that things work that is sort of different from what they might expect, or a concept, a technical concept that that they really need to understand before they can then go away and do what they need to do. So I really like the idea of the explainer as a way of sort of framing that kind of content. And then here's an example of giving people a way to size up a piece of content. So it doesn't have to be, users won't always be able to see a full piece of content at a glance, but we can do things like give them a word count, for instance. I wanted to point out this one because another example that you sometimes see of this that I think is really bad is the estimated time to read a piece of content. So you'll still, I think, often see content, that little label that says like 5-minute read or 10-minute read. The problem with that is it's really uninclusive. People read at different speeds, and we don't want to. It would be very easy for users to see that and feel, well, I'm supposed to only take this amount of time to read this content. And as a slow reader myself, it it just gives me that slight kind of anxiety. And it's never something that we want to do for users, especially with what we know about different levels of literacy. So a word count is something about content itself. It's not about the user. And then an example of a non-imperative content, a non-imperative label for related content. I really like this one, Your Next Watch from Netflix. It's obviously very much in the Netflix kind of voice. So it's kind of saying, it's basically saying, okay, so once you finish with this, here's your next watch. But it's not conveying the idea that it comes across as a suggestion rather than an imperative. So yeah, so as I say, I think they're examples of how we can sort of look to the world outside the type of content that most of us work on most of the time to kind of get some inspiration for how we can do a better job of encapsulation. So that's my talk. Do you have some time for questions and comments? And there's quite a few comments in the chat. I'm gonna paste a link into the chat as well. I did the QR code because I was doing an in-person talk, but I basically collected everything together around the sort of references to things that kind of inspired this idea that I talked about towards the beginning of the talk, and the slides will also be on that page as well. It's just a Notion page. So I will just grab that link and stick it into the chat. And McGee, if you'd like to, first of all, I think McGee sort of picked up this idea and run with it in a way that I think is an interesting kind of application, which is around kind of topic landing pages. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, McGee. Happy to answer questions. Interested whether people feel like this is something that's kind of a useful concept or a useful way of thinking about content. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Angus. That was so awesome to actually hear you talk it through end to end. And now I'm actually, because as Angus said, this has really informed the thinking that we've had around a very big state government website that we're kind of working on a content strategy for. And but hearing you do this talk, I now want to go back and like add a few more things, including like explainers and stuff. But yeah, thank you so much. And there was lots of chat in the thread, primarily of people just very engaged with some of the things that you were saying. There's also been some suggestions for names, including holistic content. Someone suggested pocketbook content. And there's a couple more which I'll come through. Aidan mentioned the kind of leakiness thing from a kind of government perspective as being a kind of completeness aversion in government, which I thought was like a great description.
I love that. Yeah.
It's like we're so helpful. We've got so much helpful information. Here it all is, and it's But yeah,
wouldn't it be terrible if this one, like if this 0.1% of people who have this kind of edge case situation read this page and didn't realize that there was this one little exception that only applied to them. All that kind of government.
And there's a
lot of forces against encapsulation. For sure.
And I think that, just to touch on what you mentioned before about the topic things, is what we've realized, and I think what Angus was kind of referring to there, is that this encapsulation, when you're dealing with really big websites, can't just, you can consider it not just at a page level, but at a kind of topic level. And we've been thinking a lot about how do you encapsulate a topic, so that it isn't just a list of pages, but it kind of gives you a sense of what you're going to have on offer to you. Do you have a list of rules, a list of services, a list of guidance? Like how do you kind of tell people within this topic there is types of things you might,
because I think, I don't want to create the impression that encapsulation has to mean everything is on one page. It's horses for courses, and so I think that the idea of the topic page that basically just lists all the things that people might need to consult for the topic, but also gives them a really, really clear expectation around what each of those things is, that's kind of almost doing encapsulation at a level up from from what you would do on a kind of an individual content page. So I think it's probably just as important to do it in those sort of topic pages as it is to do on a sort of a deeper, on a sort of a more granular content page.
Yeah. There's lots of, like I said, lots of chat, particularly around things like PDFs and accordions, which is, we can forever about that. There's comments here about reading time as well, and it's kind of lack of inclusiveness that entails. There was some questions though too. I'm just trying to find them because they've gotten lost. All right, Rebecca asked, what are your thoughts on linking to other organization websites when naming them in content? It improves SEO and credibility, but may not serve as there's not much purpose for that for the user if there's no need for them to click on that link.
Oh, when we're naming the other organization?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. Yeah, because we get lots of situations where you do want to link because, in fact, the other organization does a better job of meeting the user need than you would. And in that case, I think the best thing is just to, rather than trying to duplicate what they do, just send them off to. And we've been coming across this on our current project where there's a lot of information that is really better served by another website. As for whether when we mention another organization, should we link to their name? Should we link their name to their website? I would tend to err on the side of saying yes, just because. Why? That's a really interesting one. I would tend to err on the side of saying yes, just because I think there will be
the convention.
You can imagine situations where people will want to check out this other organization. Like if the organization is important enough to mention, it's probably important enough to some users that you will want to make it easy for them to get to the right. And I guess thinking about it, what if you didn't have that link? What the risk is that the user Googles the organization and ends up at a similar an organization with a similar sounding name that's not actually the right one. And we see that happen all the time. We're dealing with a domain where there's something called the Australian Business Register, the Business Registration Service. What else is there, Laurie? And there's like about five different things that all sound like they're the same, but they're actually different. So sorry, just thinking out loud. So I think the important thing is if you're going to link to something, don't create the appearance don't surround that with content that creates the appearance the user has to go and click on that link. And which is kind of easy to do. I think it's easy to do it unwittingly. That's kind of why I think linking is the big thing that we should be paying more attention to, because we do tend to be so unmindful about the way we do it. So I don't know if I've given a clear answer, but I think that's an example where the link itself is actually useful. You can see that it has a utility to the user, but we still need to be thinking about how we're framing that link in our content.
So I'll just ask one more, even though there's actually a lot of chat here that I think you'll probably want to go back and read, which is from Dan. So Dan mentioned a book called The Shallows, which opened his eyes to unmindful linking and sounds really interesting.
Great.
But he also asked what your thoughts are on anchor linking as a way of reinforcing encapsulation.
Yes, I think anchor linking is most useful when you've got a long piece of content and you're linking to something that is a fair distance from the link. What I see a lot in this might not be answering Dan's question, but what I do see a lot in anchor linking, especially in government, is anchor linking to a section that is probably going to be visible to the user on the same screen that they're reading, or linking back to something they've already read. And the trouble with anchor links is that it's not, we don't have a standardized way of differentiating anchor links from links off the page, and users, that it's really easy for that to actually confuse users. Users don't know, don't, you know, actually will click on an anchor link and just not be sure what's happening, because they're less common than links kind of off the page. So I think it's just another case where you have to be really judicious and think about, does the user really need an anchor link there, or is it going to be fairly obvious from the context if we're referring to another section of the website? You know, we can, as long as we're using the same labeling, like, you know, we're referring to things by a consistent name. You know, there's other ways of kind of reinforcing the structure of our page, rather than by always kind of using anchor links.
Yeah, at my last last website I worked on, Angus, we had a consistent module for it. You could switch on and switch off, and it was always titled on this page, so it was very clear.
Oh, on this page.
Yeah, and it would follow you down the page as well. So it would,
the kind of table of contents I think is great. Yeah. Sorry, I was more talking the ones I said that I think
clear. I realised as soon as I said it, I'm like, oh,
more the kind of inline anchor links, and we'll often just remove those because they're just overkill. One thing. Sorry, McGee, I know we've got announcements.
Yeah.
I want to start a one-person campaign to reintroduce the idea from the early web of having a visual distinction between visited links and unvisited links.
Yeah.
It's something designers got rid of because it looks messy. I think we should accept the messiness and bring it back because it's so useful. Like, it's so, it is, you know, it has an undeniable kind of utility. And I don't know why we just accepted that that we couldn't have them anymore because we wanted our websites to look neat and pretty. So yeah, that's my parting thought.
Sort of a parting thought. What I'll do is I'll just do the announcements if there's any real quick. Pop them in the thread, and I can take you off mute, or I can read it out for you. While you're popping those in, though, I will just say the next meetup is on the 25th of June. We are organising a speaker, but we haven't confirmed them yet, so we can't announce, but hopefully it'll be a really interesting topic. We think it will be. And past talks are on YouTube, including this one, which we'll post soon. And if you want to catch up or share it with anyone, you'll be able to do it through that link. We have a content design in action course coming up, the CDL course, previously called advanced content design. That's on the 24th to the 25th of July. Sorry, I was doing that really quickly and obviously misspelled it. Yeah, sign up for that if you're interested to learn more about content design. And we haven't yet scheduled a fundamentals course, but we will soon enough and announce that next time. And I think that's everything. So yeah, we usually stick around for a few minutes if there is any questions. I'm sure Angus won't mind. You can pop them in the chat, and if there's any announcements, now is the time to let us know. But if not, we'll let you go on with your day, and thank you for joining us. And thank you, Angus.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I'll just share that link in case anyone didn't get it to the page with all the links to stuff.
Great. Thank you.
Great to see everyone.
Lots of thanks. Lots of people saying how great it was, Angus.
Thanks, Vicky.
I can see your cat, Aiden, just strolling across the screen. It's universal cat behavior, isn't it?
We moved the desk and he really likes it in here. So
you'll often see Lorraine's cat Jara doing the same thing. Yeah.
Aiden's actually been to this talk twice, so
oh, cool.
Thanks for coming again.
You can do an A/B test.
Angus.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you can see, it's completely the same as the Sydney version. I just haven't had time to really develop it any further, but
it feels like there's more of the OOUX inflected stuff once you get into the middle.
Yeah.
That's partly because because we did have Sophia a couple of months ago, so I felt like I could refer to OUX a bit more, but yeah, it's definitely, and I think I hadn't finished we've got Richard here, who's one of the mentors on the OUX masterclass, which Richard McGee, my colleagues McGee and Emma, who's not here, are planning to do the next cohort. So
in September.
we are big fans. But yeah. I think more and more I'm thinking this is a way. I mean, yeah, it's a way of thinking through that kind of bridge between OUX and content design.
I think that's what we've found for sure, because OUX, when applying it to thousands and thousands of pages, if you have to treat it a little bit differently. I almost think like the way that you think about objects, you have to think about it slightly differently, and is what we've been finding in the one we've been working on. Yeah, but it's so useful.
Anyway, thanks again, Angus. Thanks,
Aidan.
Thanks, McGee. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Weave. See you folks next time.
We'll see you all next time. Yeah. Thanks for joining from Germany, Ralph, at such an early time.
4 a.m.
Yeah, 4 a.m. 5 a.m. now, so it's fine. Have a cup of coffee. Yeah.
Ralph often comes at weird times for him.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's no further questions in the chat, so we might say goodbye.
Let's wrap it up.
And